Human history holds a dark paradox where total destruction consistently drives our greatest progress. We often view armed conflict simply as a tragic breakdown of normal international diplomacy. However, war fundamentally acts as the ultimate mechanism for altering global balances of power. To understand this brutal reality, we must examine what experts call power transition theory. Published in 1958 by Organsky, it visualizes a hierarchical global power pyramid. A dominant hegemon sits at the top, supported by lesser and medium-sized states. The danger of systemic war peaks when dissatisfied rising powers challenge a declining hegemon. Wars historically dictate exactly which coalitions will hold global dominance over the international system. Today, direct conflict between nuclear powers means mutual annihilation, so states use proxy warfare. A proxy war involves an external sponsor funding or arming a third-party fighter. The biggest advantage here is plausible deniability, allowing sponsors to avoid direct international condemnation. But what does this geopolitical maneuvering actually cost us in real human economic terms? The devastating negative impacts of war tear apart the fabric of our global society. The economic impact of violence reached $21.8 trillion last year. This staggering financial burden equals roughly 10.5% of global gross product. In the 10 most affected countries, violence costs averaged 23% of wealth. Beyond the money, we must look at the deeply tragic loss of human life. There were over 181,000 violent conflict deaths recorded last year. The human toll is unimaginable, displacing 117 million people globally right now. Environmental decay is severe, like forces burning Kuwaiti oil wells in 1991. Furthermore, warfare completely destroys civil infrastructure, setting national development goals back by several decades. The Syrian civil war, which began on March 15, 2011, proves this. Syria lost over $110 billion in critical physical infrastructure damage alone. Toppling existing governments often creates massive political vacuums, sparking intense sectarian civil armed conflict. During the Iraq War, dissolving the military left thousands armed and deeply dangerously unemployed. This specific security vacuum directly fueled the eventual dangerous rise of modern terror groups. Psychological trauma from historical atrocities transmits across generations to descendants and affected grandchildren today. Clinical research shows third-generation Holocaust survivors exhibiting anxiety linked to past family history. Families with persecution histories demonstrate heightened vigilance and persistent trust issues toward outside groups. Intergenerational trauma changes stress response systems, leaving biological stamps on deeply traumatized survivor descendants. Modern conflicts are spreading further than at any point since the Second World War. There were 61 active state-based conflicts worldwide in 2024 alone. Today, the historical mechanisms used for successfully ending wars are clearly failing us globally. Wars ending in peace agreements fell drastically from 23 to just 4%. The risk of conflict spreading into regional clusters has risen to unprecedented crisis levels. Material factors move people, weapons, and money rapidly across dangerously porous national geographic borders. Many modern combatants self-finance, drawing on illegal drug economies and gold smuggling networks. Drug economies in conflict zones quadrupled over 10 years, hitting $59 billion. Production values in Myanmar expanded massively, reaching $35 billion in recent years. In Africa, the Sudanese civil war has triggered massive destruction, causing extreme regional instability. The Rapid Support Forces utilize gold revenues to effectively sustain their continuous war efforts. The Horn of Africa now operates as one totally interlocked regional armed conflict system. Furthermore, proxy warfare allows external states to easily sustain prolonged civil wars from afar. This competitive sponsorship fragments peace processes and drastically extends the brutal duration of fighting. Artificial intelligence is quickly becoming a terrifying new driver of global warfare and destruction. Drones have essentially become the defining weapon characterizing the grim reality of modern combat. Drone attacks rose 11,500% globally between two specific recent years. Target-to-fire times have drastically reduced down to just 5 seconds using autonomy. Human oversight of artificial intelligence targeting is increasingly being completely phased out of combat. In Gaza, systems flagged 37,000 people as suspected militant targets almost instantly. Operators reportedly spent merely 20 seconds reviewing targets, despite 10% known error rates. We are witnessing multi-domain warfare happening entirely at incredibly rapid automated machine speed. For instance, forces conducted 900 strikes within 12 short hours using automated systems. If we look at the economy, war extracts a staggering permanent cost from societies. For heavily affected nations, violence costs easily exceed 20% of their domestic product. The gap between peaceful states and violent states continues widening drastically every single year. When fighting happens directly on sovereign territory, the economic damage becomes incredibly permanent fast. Capital stocks drop substantially, and populations shrink from casualties and massive outward refugee flows. Post-conflict recovery is agonizingly slow, leaving behind deeply entrenched poverty and institutional decay. Now we must transition to the most uncomfortable and paradoxical truth about human conflict. Despite the horrific devastation, existential pressure forces humanity to innovate at astonishing, unprecedented speeds. War compels governments, scientists, and industries to collaborate, pushing boundaries impossible during peaceful times. Consider the First World War, which forced rapid advancements in mass steel production globally. Before 1914, steel was mainly for cities, but war forged it into armor. While chemical warfare was brutal, its factories later produced synthetic fertilizers and vital medicines. The Second World War brought revolutions, fundamentally changing technology, medicine, and global energy generation. In February 1940, British scientists invented the cavity magnetron for accurate microwave radar. This military invention was later repurposed to create the household microwave oven we use. The Manhattan Project employed over 120,000 people, solving complex scientific problems. This massive investment model created the blueprint for modern, state-sponsored scientific research programs. To crack German codes, engineer Tommy Flowers built the first programmable electronic digital computer. Operational in January 1944, Colossus laid the groundwork for the digital age. Penicillin went from a laboratory curiosity into mass production directly because of wartime necessity. Deep tank fermentation techniques developed for soldiers ultimately revolutionized civilian healthcare across the globe. Germany developed the first operational jet fighter, sparking the global aviation revolution we see. During the Cold War, ideological competition drove the intense race for space exploration dominance. The Soviet launch of Sputnik pushed America to rapidly invest in advanced aerospace engineering. This rivalry directly gave us global satellite communications, weather monitoring, and modern navigation systems. Conflict also drives institutional progress by revealing the deadly flaws in prior diplomatic systems. Following massive casualties, world leaders established the United Nations to prevent future catastrophic wars. Ratified on October 24, 1945, this framework revolutionized our global diplomacy. This diplomatic forum successfully prevented direct total military conflict between superpowers for 80 years. Even today, artificial intelligence funding for peacebuilding initiatives is quietly growing amid military investments. Artificial intelligence models now translate humanitarian information into marginalized dialects for vulnerable refugee populations. Satellite imagery combined with machine learning allows organizations to rigorously document wartime human abuses. For example, researchers verified 19,500 children deported during the Ukraine war. Automated platforms facilitate inclusive digital mediation, gathering peace-building consensus among deeply divided communities. Existential threats frequently eliminate outdated societal structures and rigid economic class hierarchies almost entirely. Labor shortages during total wars opened critical industrial workforce opportunities for marginalized societal groups. We must also understand how military spending sometimes acts as an enormous fiscal stimulus. Governments borrow heavily to finance defense production, temporarily boosting employment and national industrial output. Geopolitical competition pushes states to secure rare earth minerals, accelerating green energy transition technologies. Demographics also fundamentally shape geopolitics, altering the available military manpower and national economic productivity. Countries facing severe demographic decline struggle to maintain their traditional forceful geopolitical security postures. Conversely, nations experiencing youth bulges gain dynamic workforces, potentially enhancing their regional strategic influence. Power transition happens precisely when shifting economic and demographic realities cross these critical thresholds. Middle powers leverage these shifts, expanding their diplomatic influence outside traditional bipolar superpower alliances. Modern geopolitics is entering a phase scholars actively define as the Great Global Fragmentation. Increased trade restrictions, sanctions, and defense spending indicate a highly competitive, fractured international system. Through this fragmentation, wars continuously reconfigure global supply chains, prioritizing security over economic efficiency. When we connect all these historical and modern threads, a deeply sobering picture emerges. Ultimately, armed conflict serves as the violent architect, actively building our modern geopolitical reality. War brings immense, unquantifiable suffering, destroying generations of innocent lives and fragile societal progress. Millions of real people lose their homes, families, and futures to decisions made elsewhere. Yet it remains the fiercest crucible for technological miracles and systemic international political change. The medical treatments and digital communications we use daily were forged in these fires. Understanding this dualism is absolutely essential for anyone studying global history and international relations. We must acknowledge the horror while objectively analyzing the transformative outcomes it leaves behind. As new technologies like artificial intelligence mature, the nature of war will fundamentally shift, but the core geopolitical motives of power, resources, and security will remain exactly constant. The global cost of ignoring these hard lessons is $21 trillion annually. We have to ask ourselves if the progress gained is worth the blood spilled. Could we achieve these exact same technological leaps without the existential terror of warfare? How do we build peace when conflict has been our primary engine for modernization? These are the uncomfortable questions we must confront to navigate our deeply fragmented future. I want to hear your thoughts on this incredibly complex and dark historical paradox. Which wartime innovation do you believe truly changed the modern world the absolute most? Let me know your perspective down in the comments below, and keep it respectful. Thank you for exploring this intense geopolitical reality with me in this deep dive. Do not forget to subscribe for more geopolitical deep dives. See you next time.